Welcome back, everybody, to Real Squawk. This is episode 3. My name is Jason Crean. I'm joined by Tiffany Park, Lisa Bolstad, and Jordan Daniel. And it was brought to my attention that March is National Nutrition Month. So we are going to discuss some common myths that we hear about avian nutrition. If you're on social media, you've probably seen many of these, if not all. These are some things that Lisa assembled for us that you can pause or come back to, but we're going to hit some of these today as we talk about the top 12 myths that are around avian nutrition. Our goal is not to shame. We are all here to help and improve the lives of the birds that we take care of. So some of the things on here you may do or you may have believed at one time, but we want to make sure that we're putting out good information, and some of it questions the status quo. We know the internet and social media is full of false information. For some reason, and I know you have all seen this, when it comes to what people feed their birds, they are very, how can I say this, passionate about what they feed. Some of them will choose the hill to die on when it comes to their favorite brand of bird food, for example. And often the torches and pitchforks come out, and people start attacking and fighting over these things. So we're not here to shame anybody, but we do want to share some information about some of these common myths. So some of this bad information often starts with "my bird loves." I love chocolate cake, but I shouldn't be eating it every day, right? Tiffany, what'd you say?
Fries.
What?
French fries.
Oh, French fries. Yeah. Yeah, things like this that aren't good for people are absolutely not good for birds. What often we people will try to make an excuse. I see this often where we'll say, oh, it's just a treat. But a treat for a bird, a bird that has a pretty small body mass overall, can be really problematic. So, if you're going to offer treats, they should be healthy things that are part of their regular diet that are high value. Or I have fed blank for a long time and never had a problem. We know that long-term health issues can come about. So unless you're having blood work done very, very regularly, some of those problematic items should be avoided. I heard that blank is bad for birds. I know Tiffany and I just talked about, was it spinach?
Yes.
I think it was specifically spinach, and we'll talk about that later, being bad, quote unquote, bad for birds, but it's not, but we can address that. And then birds should never or always have blank. Anytime I see something where people are speaking in absolutes like that, it gives me pause. So just some things to watch for, because anybody can say anything and state it as fact on social media. So be very careful with that information. But I think probably the one we've all heard the most is that seed and nuts are bad. And I often say the F word, fat, because fat is not bad. Some fat should be limited, but all organisms need fat in the diet. So what have you all heard people give as far as reasoning around this myth?
Mostly what I hear, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure, because I think my mic was acting weird earlier. I think, the number one thing I hear, especially with respect to nuts, is that it's going to cause the birds to be overweight and then can lead to, heart problems and weight issues and health issues just as a result of the diet being too high in fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sunflower seeds. People are always bringing up sunflower seeds. I mean, you even see seed mixes, and they tout on the bag that there's it's a no sunflower mix.
Yeah.
It's full of safflower instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, with sunflower, and sunflower is a health food. Sunflower is very healthy. It's very beneficial. It has great nutrients. The reason it has such a bad reputation is because it was the bulk of parrot diets for a long time. And no one food type should make up the bulk of a diet. You really should be diversifying. But a few sunflower seeds every day are highly beneficial, can be great for training because they can be a high value food, but great source of vitamin E and other things. And you can even soak and sprout them to offer them in a different form. But like Tiffany said, I've also heard tree nuts will, quote unquote, make birds fat. And they actually do the opposite. They help maintain healthy weight because of the type of fat that you see in tree nuts. And by tree nuts, we're talking about walnuts, Brazil nuts, pine nuts, filberts or hazelnuts, things like that. Those are the healthier choices, not peanuts. Peanuts are a legume. I avoid peanuts at all costs for many reasons, but one of them is their poor fatty acid profile. But there's lots of benefits to offering tree nuts. They just shouldn't make up the predominant part of the diet.
Yeah, you'll hear that a lot with Amazons, that you shouldn't feed nuts to Amazons because Amazons tend to be overweight. And if you feed nuts to them, it'll get worse. So they'll end up with fatty liver disease.
Well, and you shouldn't feed like 15 nuts a day to an Amazon, right? Especially in this country, because I've talked to a lot of people in other countries about this, and especially in this country, though, if a little is good, a lot must be better. That's a really bad way to live, right? And we do that with our diets, I think, too, a lot of the time. So, diversifying the diet is just better so that they're not eating too much of any one thing.
Well, and know your species too. I mean, macaws, you can give a few more nuts to than you should probably give Amazons to.
Yeah,
exactly. Some species need more fat than others. And I think a lot of these like, false rumors or information that's being put out there, I've seen people keeping Amazons in stacked cages and feeding this stuff. So of course they're going to get fat when you're keeping them that way. It's also important to house them in something roomy where they can exercise and they're able to work off that fat and burn it off and not become overweight.
Yeah, and birds have some of the highest resting metabolic rates out there. Their heart hums even at rest, and so they need fat. They need higher energy foods. But like Jordan said, and flight is not the only type of exercise. Just because your birds aren't free flying does not mean they can't exercise and be healthy. And so that's really, really important to offer them, the biggest environment you can, make them work for their food, make them forage, hang food in the middle of the cage so they have to hang upside down and climb for it. All these types of things will help them. But sugars, especially processed sugars, are what will make your bird fatter the fastest. Because those sugars, when they enter the liver, are going to be not enter the liver, but when the liver's involved, that basically turns sugar into fat through a process called lipogenesis. So the sugars are a real problem, especially refined sugars in processed pellets and things like that. So we definitely need to get our birds moving, but we also need to diversify their diets so that they're getting many different types of these foods and not too much of any one thing.
Mhm.
So since we just brought up pellets, we often hear pellets are the ultimate diet. And that kind of drives me nuts because anytime I see something as a complete diet, especially for the wide diversity of species that we're keeping, isn't possible. And it's simply not true. And just because something is added to the diet, added to a pellet, doesn't mean that it's still there after processing. And anything that's been heated, especially to the point of dryness, and there's a lot of controversy over dog and cat foods now because of the kibble and the inflammatory compounds that are in there, and they're produced in much the same way. But when these foods are heated to the point of dryness so that they have a long shelf life, you've got an increase of inflammatory compounds. And so the way to bring down inflammation is by offering healthier foods. And tree nuts, for example, have omega-3 fatty acids. Those are, or some of the seeds like hemp, chia, flax, those all have omega-3s, which bring down inflammation. And so those antioxidants that are in whole food are going to help combat any of those problem causers that are in the pellets.
Mhm.
Yep.
Good points.
What is everybody feeding their birds these days?
Well, for me, so I do have cockatoos here. So I do fresh food, and then I do pellets, and I've used the top pellets as well. I kind of alternate between brands, but it's very minimal. It's only about 10% of the entire of what they get daily. So I do implement a lot of fresh foods as well, and I think that's very important too, especially for breeders who keep, over 50 or to 100 pairs of birds, and they're, I don't want to single anybody out, but when we're only feeding one thing and we're saying that that's, that is the best route to go because it's easy and convenient, I don't necessarily agree with that because I believe we can do a lot better, especially for the birds. They need to be, their lives do need to be enriched. They need to be kept busy. They need to not be given the same thing every day,
Yeah, so I'm doing something similar. I feed probably I think it's like 3 different seed blends that I'm feeding right now that I mix sort of together arbitrarily. I just have a scoop and I'll scoop a little bit into the dish or whatever each day. And one of the seed blends that I like, just because I'm limited in my selections, is that one of the Higgins blends, and it does have their Intune pellets in it. So there's exposure to them, but most of the birds don't eat them either way. But it's, for me, I don't want to say it's unavoidable. I just haven't yet found kind of like a comparable blend that I can use that limits the waste that I experience. Mostly with the kakarikis, because they're going to be wasteful regardless. They're very wasteful birds, but I've tried 3 or 4 different blends with them, and this is the one where I get the least amount of waste. So they get those 3 seed blends kind of like in the evening or whatever, and then that's what they eat sort of in the afternoon part of their day, and then in the morning all of them get a fresh mash. So it's a combination of sprouted seed. I put a little bit of Graywood Manor Provisions avian teas in there. I do a variety of fruits, or I want to say a variety of vegetables, and maybe like 1, maybe 2 fruit components. And I just try to avoid any types of fruits that are really moist, because I hate that word, but just made me like visibly cringe. I saw myself cringe. Just because I feel like it spoils faster. And when I make mine, I make it in I have this huge Halloween candy bowl that I bought specifically because it was the biggest bowl I could find, because I got really sick of trying to stir it and it's spilling out of my mixing bowls. So I have this huge bowl that I mix it in, and everybody always asks me whenever I share pictures, gosh, like, how long, isn't that going to spoil? Do you freeze it? I don't freeze anything. The amount that I made that I shared on Facebook the other day it's going to be gone tomorrow. So where I thought it was going to last me 5 days, it's lasted me 3. So I'm kind of monopolizing here, but yeah, that's what I feed.
And you've got a lot of small, you're raising smaller birds that are high energy.
Yeah.
So you're going to go through those foods pretty quick.
Well, I have a lot of pairs. So, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's like each one of them is getting a dish every single day. And then, like you said, I have the whole outdoor aviary too, and I give it to my quail. So that accounts for quite a bit of the consumption too. I do opt to feed the quail more of a whole diet versus something like a scratch. I know it's marketed and formulated for them to eat a scratch. I do provide it. But most of the time I try to focus on them eating something more like fresh food, and they, scratch around in the aviary and eat bugs and all the stuff that the cackrickies drop.
Speaking of scratch,
God.
are we gonna dive into that? Because I feel like more and more I am seeing people post online, and I know you guys have seen it too. People are pushing this idea that chicken scratch can be fed to citizens because it's easy and it's cheap. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, it's got a bird on the package, so it must be suitable for all birds, right?
Yeah. It's annoying because I don't know what to say really without sounding like a complete a-hole, but it's just frustrating because here we are, we're trying to basically put a stop to these myths and stuff like that, and then here you have somebody conjuring up a new one and pushing this crap out there. When again, there's so many things that are better for them, that you can offer versus a one and done meal.
I would rather people feed their birds exclusively Rowdy Bush than feed them chicken scratch.
Yeah, exactly. Especially medicated chicken scratch. I've seen that too. So
yeah,
I don't know what it is, but
I mean, that when it comes to chicken feed, like chickens are not parrots. They've evolved to handle a lot of stuff like fungus in soil, where our other birds have not done that. And when you look at these corn-based foods, corn is famous for carrying fungus and spores and aflatoxins as a result of that. So, I mean, that's hugely problematic. And if it's organic, that can you would think that would be better, but it's not, because then you don't have any kind of fungicide that's combating the fungus that's inherently in these grains. And it's just, that's a lot of risk. Any kind of, and I tell people to read the labels all the time, but if you've got heated grains, if you've got peanuts or corn as one of the first in several ingredients in the food, you need to find something new. You need to find something different. And I learned a long time ago, you cannot cut corners on nutrition. You can try all kinds of things, but if you're cutting corners, it's going to show. And
I think it's more prevalent.
It may take years, but it will show.
Sorry, I almost cut you off.
No, that's okay.
I think it's more prevalent now, and it's starting to pop up more and more because of the current situation we're in, with the rise of cost of foods, inflation, all that. And people are looking for an easy alternative and a cheaper alternative. Again, there are other ways to feed that can save you money. It's just people need to put in the time and effort to actually research this stuff and come across a platform like ours where we can talk about this stuff. And hopefully, get in the head of someone who doesn't really know what to do.
Well, I really want to point this out too before we move on, because I think it's important to mention this, that in most commercial chicken scratch, or the concept of like a chicken scratch or a feed, is to bring a bird from a chick to like a processing age and size very quickly. So you're feeding these birds so that they can go to slaughter in 12 to 15 months. So they're high protein to build those, those oversized breast muscles. I mean, that's what you look for in a chicken that you're going to slaughter, is these, big, overdeveloped, juicy, succulent breasts that you can eat later. So, so
sorry,
I think,
sorry to all the vegans watching.
yeah, it's so delicious. But yeah, so I think that that's important to kind of to note that, though, because you have to look at the intent behind the diet, and then think about what that could potentially do to your birds if you're feeding it to them, because they're not meant to be, growing at a super fast rate and putting on all this, muscle
and once again, it's the difference between surviving and thriving. And that's a huge deal for me, because we could feed these processed foods and keep our birds alive. But like Jordan said, you have to enrich their lives if we're going to keep them from just surviving and get them closer to thriving, because thriving means they're far away from disease. They're far away from disorder. And if we're giving them the basics just to keep them alive, like I said, that's going to show. It may take some time, but it will show.
Well, we know from public health studies that have been done on nutrition that the foods that are cheapest for people to buy are ultra processed foods. And we know that is why marginalized communities have more health issues, is because they're not buying whole foods. They're eating that cheap processed food. It is cheaper. That doesn't mean it's better for you. It certainly doesn't with people. And I don't think it does for animals either.
And in food deserts, like, it's harder in some of those traditionally marginalized communities to get whole food. And that's why there's this move to help people grow their own produce in their small towns and things like that, so that they have access to fresh food. It's definitely an issue. But speaking of fresh foods, I think we've probably all heard that fresh foods are dangerous. Back when there was a bird magazine, a famous bird magazine, I won't say which one, but this was a quote from a vet who wrote, an avian vet, who I came to find out is working for a pellet company. But they basically said here that you should only feed small amounts of foods other than pellets, because it will throw off their balanced diet. And so this quote just drove me insane. I could not disagree with this more. If anything, you need to add much more fresh food if you're offering a processed food diet, because we know that processed foods are higher in inflammatory compounds. And for that matter, anything that you cook. I don't feed pasta. I don't feed bird bread. I don't feed any of that stuff, because all of that stuff is just adding inflammation to the bird. And so the less you're feeding of those heated foods, the better. But to say that it's going to throw off their nutrient balance is just plain ridiculous.
Yeah, it's funny, because I remember when we first got birds, the big thing was converting them off a seed onto pellets. So, we got everybody converted onto pellets, and then we got everybody converted onto better pellets. And I really felt like, the fresh foods probably, if they'll eat it, great, but they really need the pellets, because that's 100% balance. Right. And it really wasn't until after I joined your group, Jason, and I mean, it just made perfect sense. And then I had that little, my little lovebird who has ulcerative dermatitis, I think is what it's called. and he gets ulcers under his wings. He gets almost like an eczema across his chest and on his back. And I mean, it was bad for a while. And I just completely took him off of pellets. I only gave him fresh food. And he has a little triangle on the back of his neck now. That's it. And I had tried Silvadine. I had tried anti-inflammatories. I had tried meloxicam, you name it. We tried it. And within months, he was, I mean, it almost, he has a little patch still, but it's not bad. It almost totally got rid of it. That was proof enough for me.
Yeah, and we see that in dogs and cats who are converted to raw food diets as well. Like, I've had foster dogs come to me, and within weeks their health problems disappear. Candida, yeast infections and the creases in their face and everything, and hip issues and joint issues and skin issues, and all that stuff. And it just disappears. I mean, because you're giving the body what it needs, which is bioavailable nutrition. The body can actually use it. And that's harder to do when you're just giving them synthetic vitamins that are isolated. That's really difficult. But fresh foods are not going to damage your birds. And if anything, that recent study that just was released from the University of Guelph on the benefits of whole food and how to why you should move away from processed foods, because it increases the mental and physiological health of birds and gives them more foraging opportunities. This is a picture. This is your chop, right, Tiffany? That you have pictured here. So
Yeah.
when you see this, there is all kinds of different foraging opportunities in one bowl, right? Every time they pick something up, it's a different texture, taste, color. All of that matters. All of that matters. And so, we need to be doing more of that, and it's not hard to do.
Right. It's almost like this vet or doctor is saying, stay away from salads because they're unhealthy and you should just be eating more cheeseburgers.
I like
that's
that.
exactly what.
Just
like
take
that advice.
multivitamins, or just have cereal, enriched total cereal or something like that. You'll get everything you need. Yeah.
Or some good Kraft mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't mix the cereals, because if you mix the cereals, then you're messing with the nutritional balance of the cereal.
Exactly. Well,
and
we've been lied to as a public. We were told for decades that these enriched cereals were going to make us healthier. And now when you look at our society as a whole, I mean, metabolically, we're a mess. I mean, the diseases that are out there, we just tend to not, we tend to just pretend like it's not from nutrition, like really bad nutritional practice. But there's still people who are eating lots and lots of that enriched cereal saying, oh, this is healthy. Look, it says enriched. It says it's got all these vitamins and minerals. But we're ignoring the fact that it's also highly ultra processed. And I remember back in the 90s, early 90s, Dr. Becker and I thought that pellets were going to solve the problems, and then we come to find out they really haven't. And so, it's difficult. And I know, Jordan, you brought up Tops, and Tops is really the only pellet that I can even recommend in good conscience, because it's cold pressed, it's not heated, and it's all whole food. There's no synthetics added to it, and they don't claim it to be a complete diet. And that's because there's no such thing anyway. So, I feel good about offering that, especially with alfalfa, which has complete protein and fiber in it, which can be really beneficial. But fresh foods are not dangerous. I also hear that cooked foods are better than whole food because because whole food spoils while you're at work or school. This is another one that's completely opposite, right? Fresh food does not spoil during the day. If it's hot out, and your birds are in the heat, there's a greater chance that it's going to go bad faster. But what spoils fastest is cooked food. Cooked food spoils faster. It'll form molds and things like that much quicker. So another reason not to feed bird bread and pastas and rices and things like that. There's no reason to offer those things.
Right, cooked rices though, right?
Cooked
'Cause,
rices, yeah.
I would say to that too, that my whole food doesn't last more than 30 to 45 minutes in the cage anyway, as my
Yeah.
dogs try to run off with my laptop.
Right.
I don't think they last long enough in my cages to spoil. So it's never even been something that's crossed my mind.
No, and then if you're feeding them, in portions, then that eliminates waste and chances of spoiling anyway. Now if you're going to take a bowl of fresh cooked food and leave it out there all day, where the birds won't even, they'll maybe eat, a third of it, a third of a cup if you put a cup out there. So yeah.
Well, and I think people are when birds have gotten sick off of cooked foods or, mash that's left out, there's something that happens with rice. What is it, Jason, when it's been cooked and it's left out? Oh gosh, there's just been a couple things in the news lately about rice and pasta when it's cooked and left out overnight and people have eaten it and gotten really sick. I can't think what it is. There's some toxin or something that
is it the arsenic in the rice?
No, it's not that. It's something. I'll have to send you guys the article. There's something in it. You can look it up. There have been several cases. One kid had 2 legs amputated. Another kid died from eating pasta or rice that had sat out overnight. And it produces some kind of heinous, I don't know if it's a toxin or bacteria, but I'm wondering if when people have had sick birds from stuff sitting out, it's because it is cooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, the bacteria and fungus, it loves to grow on cooked food, because the cooked food you've basically cooking has damaged the food to the point where the nutrients are available more readily to these microorganisms. And cooked food, like plants protect themselves. So when you're feeding raw food like this, they have, they're kind of their cell walls are intact, which we're allowing the plants to naturally protect themselves from those problem causers. And then birds consuming those are getting that healthy fiber to boot. So it all ends up beneficial. And then, even soaking, like the picture up at the top here is just split peas and some nuts, and those are just soaked overnight in cool water and rinsed and fed the next day. So, you can definitely start in small steps. This is very inexpensive. It's very easy to do. It takes literally no time. And then you're increasing the digestibility and the bioavailability of those nutrients by a lot. Some nuts just soaked overnight out of the shell can increase their digestibility and nutrient availability by 300%. So it's pretty significant. But nuts are a seed, so that shouldn't be super surprising, because when seeds get wet, they start to germinate and start to take the storage molecules, the starch and the fats, and convert them into proteins and things like that. So I think we've all heard this one, right?
Yeah.
My birds will never eat this.
Yeah, you get that one a lot when you're rehoming birds. They're just not going to eat it. I tried for 3 days and they're not eating it.
Yeah.
Just Ritz and cheese. That's all they'll eat.
Mm-hmm.
Ritz and Cocoa Puffs.
Ritz and Cocoa Puffs.
So yeah, I mean, I often say that getting birds to eat healthier is often changing human behavior over the bird behavior, because we give up so easily. Trying things 2 or 3 times is not enough. And sometimes you need to try weeks to months of exposure, or trying to offer it in different ways. Like Tiffany's birds here are eating this dice stuff because that's the form that they tend to like it in, versus the upper right-hand corner there with the food on a skewer. where big birds, might like to chew and destroy those things. And that's the best gateway to get them eating something better. But these foraging objects are just worth their weight in gold. You can get these skewers and these foraging objects, and they'll last the lifetime of the bird probably. Those plastic balls are made of bulletproof plastic. And you can stuff them with just about anything and get the birds, actively eating.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, well, I told you guys about the Amazon that we took in who had been on a very poor diet. And, the first couple days he wasn't big about trying anything, but, he'd just been moved. He was probably nervous. But within a few days, our foster home had him eating vegetables off a skewer, and he had never eaten fresh food. And I did it with a 25-year-old Patagonian conure that had only ever eaten frozen corn and sunflower seeds because his family was afraid he'd starve because he didn't really want to eat anything else. And he eats everything now. So you can absolutely convert a bird to a fresh diet. You just have to be patient.
Copper and Rooster are at the front by the gate.
You forgot to mute yourself, Jordan.
Oh, crap.
You win the award for funniest line, Jordan.
You took your video off, but left the microphone on.
Why can't they just have one option to do both?
Because it needs to be hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say when I had Aspen, because we talked about sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds were kind of his treat that he really liked, and on his tree stand, I would just hide a few sunflower seeds in different spots, and it was a game for him. He loved, he knew exactly what I was doing when I was doing it, and he would just run all over that stand. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Looking for it. So there's definitely a bunch of different ways to do foraging, and even with small birds, I know the upper right and the African gray are kind of foraging things for larger birds, but you can still do that kind of stuff with the little ones and just get, they have smaller, you can buy the little 3 or 4 inch skewers, and you can cut the pieces in smaller bits. And you can still, present food in a skewer. I have skewers for the aviary, but mine eat it like this, so it's it is.
Yeah. Lisa, I got the link you just sent me. So it's Bacillus cereus, and what that does is it says experts warn against the dangers of improperly storing rice because items such as rice and pasta contain a bacterium called Bacillus cereus, and that produces a toxin when it's heated and then left out too long. So yeah, that's definitely one of those bacteria that you want to avoid, and that comes with cooking rice and pasta and then leaving that out. I always say cooked food is much more problematic than raw whole food, especially when you leave it out, during the day.
Well, you just keep getting proven right again and again, don't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all based on science, where people have done research on processed foods and inflammatory compounds that form when foods are cooked. I mean, my grandmother used to, I can hear her voice yelling about, don't cook everything out of the food. We would never have a well done steak. That's because it's so high, it's much higher in carcinogens because you basically, charred it to death. But even when it comes to vegetables and things like that, grains, when you heat grains, they have an amino acid called asparagine, and that transforms into acrylamide, which is a cancer causer. It's an inflammatory compound. And so, it's just better to not feed or eat a lot of this processed heated foods.
It's okay to steam some vegetables though, right? Like sweet potatoes.
Yeah, there's some exceptions, like lightly steaming sweet potatoes increases their digestibility and their nutrient availability. but don't char them or deep fry them, things like that.
Right.
They're not healthy that way.
Or bake them
Or
Mhm.
boil them.
Yeah.
I think people boil them a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is
just don't
different than
ruin
steaming.
them. Don't ruin them. And you can feed sweet potato raw. That's not going to hurt. That's not going to hurt anything. Like some people seem to think it's going to be it's toxic or it's going to kill the bird, but we feed raw sweet potato all the time. So here's another one, and Jordan can speak to this. Because when you've got species that are specialists, right? They've evolved to eat specialized diets. Some want to cut corners and make it easier. So Jordan, go ahead, and I'm sure you've heard it all.
Oh yeah. Even in our previous episodes, I've mentioned here and there, about what I've heard, people feeding their birds, or they're wanting to avoid a messy lorry, which is almost impossible. So I've heard of people just feeding nothing but dry powder. I've seen them feed seed. I've seen them feed pellets. So a lot of that is just, it's false information. And the way that these birds work, their anatomy and the way they digest food, it's made for nectar and, a high moisture diet. Their tongues are specifically designed to gather nectar and pollen in the wild from flowers, sapping trees and all that. So it's very important to try and replicate that. And, we talked about diversity across the board, and you can do this with lorries too. So in my nectar mix, especially when I get a new bird that has been on a pellet diet or an all dry powder diet, and they're very finicky about trying something new, I look for ways that I can try to get them to, to eat the nectar. And that's whether it's adding fruit or flowers, leaves, stems, stuff like that, which I am implementing into my diet. It keeps them entertained, and it keeps them interested, and it keeps them, chewing and feeling the texture of certain things. And some take to it right away and some don't. But, like you guys said, it's not, it just depends on the bird. It can happen quickly where they just convert, or it's going to take time. And I don't give up. And sometimes, I do have people that acquire a bird, or they get a bird, and, you have the pet store, wherever they got the bird from, they're told to feed dry powder or pellets. Now, dry powder it's not the devil, I'm not saying not to ever feed that. You can, but just make sure to feed them nectar at least once a day. So it's very important for their digestive systems as well. There's a bunch of safe flowers, safe foliage that you can give them that can really just enrich their lives, period. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy enough to add whole food to the nectar. It looks like you got chopped fruit and things like that in there, and that's got to add to the enrichment, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, they love to. They're very taste oriented birds, and they love to feel the texture of certain things.
Yep.
Especially with their tongues. I know it looks kind of funny when they do it, because they're kind of like doing a bunch of that. But
you haven't lived until you've seen it, until you've been assaulted by that crazy jointed tongue of theirs with the little fuzzy things on the end. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So and I just do this, I do it every day, to be honest, just because I don't want them to get bored with their food. Right. Some of it, they may not eat all of it, but at least I know that I'm offering that for them to mess with and, do whatever they want. Now, there are days that I do, fresh foliage and fruits, and I'll place the fruit on top of the flight cages, and they'll climb up there, fly up there, and hang upside down and eat the fruit through the wire. And that's because I'm allowing them to actually work for their food, right? As they would do in the wild.
Yeah, and there's no bird that's more acrobatic than lories.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can have a perch that's, like this, and they're
Yep.
hanging on the side, and yeah, it's like piece of cake to them.
Yep.
So
Can you
yeah.
can you add a little bit about citrus, Jordan, lories and citrus?
So when I first got into lories, I didn't know this, but citrus actually, I believe it raises iron levels, or it contributes to iron storage. And lories cannot properly store iron, so they do need a low iron diet. A lot of birds that have been fed these processed pellets, or even poorly made lory diets, that are high in iron, they typically develop liver or kidney issues, and they die an early death. Birds that are 3, 4, 5 years old that can live well into their teens and into their 20s. They're dying at an early age. So you got to be really, really careful. And as Jason said, read the ingredients, read what's on the back of the package. That's very important. And any lory diet or commercial diet that you're looking into, I know a lot of companies that don't put the iron content on the label, and I think that's super important. So if they don't have that on the label and you're interested in their food, you should just directly reach out to them and ask for a thorough analysis, just to be on the safe side. In my opinion, you don't want to go anything over 80 parts per million iron content. Anything higher than that, you're kind of pushing it, you're kind of risking their health at that point. And another thing to add is I've heard of people feeding hummingbird nectar, which is just literally, it's just sugar water. There's no nutritional benefit to it at all. Honey is okay, but you want to be careful with, I think if it's pasteurized honey. I could be wrong. I don't remember exactly, but you want to be careful where it comes from and how it's processed and whatnot. You definitely want to stay away from added sugars or processed sugars like high fructose. I know people have, do you guys know the brand Nectar? It's like a juice brand and it's called Nectar. There's one person that comes to mind that I kind of went back and forth with online, and they said they were feeding that to their lory because the brand is called Nectar, and they thought, oh, okay, I can just feed this. Well, it's nothing but sugar. There's no nutritional value to it. And yeah, you want to be careful with that stuff. You can give juice as a treat, just make sure it's organic and there's no added sugars.
Yeah, and that pretty much rules out any type of orange juice. Like orange juice is just freakishly high sugar added. But to Lisa's comment, like Jordan explained, they need to have a low iron diet. Lories, lorikeets, starlings, minas, toucans, and we're seeing other birds now that also seem to be prone to this, and they shouldn't be. But it's probably a result of processed foods. And it's not the citrus, it's not the citric acid, it's the vitamin C in the foods that you want to avoid. Vitamin C increases the uptake of iron by the liver. And if they get too much iron in their liver, they can't metabolize it. And then it basically ends up killing them. And so citrus fruit is great for birds. But when birds like this are prone to iron problems, you want to avoid it altogether. Most parrots, though, no problem with citrus. I hear a lot of people say that, citrus is too acidic. And some of the pitted fruits like peaches and nectarines are actually more acidic than an orange. So, there's a lot of myth out there. Citrus is fine for most parrots, but not lories and lorikeets. Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that in a better way than I did. But
it's a physiological thing.
And even when I wasn't really aware of that, when I first started, I fed oranges to my birds, or tried to at least, and they took one lick and then wanted nothing to do with it after. They didn't like the taste at all. So they go for more of a sweet taste rather than a sour taste.
Yeah. There's a reason. They know better.
Yeah.
We also hear that fresh food's going to make birds hormonal, and I remember sitting on a panel discussion at a conference with 4 veterinarians, and then a couple of conservationists, and somebody asked that question, and I was very adamant about the fact that if you're not consistently offering your bird a diverse diet, and they only get like a huge amount of different types of foods like once in a while, that can make your bird hormonal. But if you're consistently offering a healthy, diverse diet like what Tiffany has pictured here, you're going to be fine. The problem also comes, and I think Jordan, you said portion sizes earlier, where we just tend to like offer tons of food to our birds all the time because we're like terrified they're going to starve. That's not really a problem. Birds don't eat 100% of the day and night. You should, I offer I offer 2 meals. I give my birds a fresh food diet in the morning, where they get soaked and sprouted items, veggies, a little bit of fruit and things like that, all fresh, all raw. And then in the evening, they'll get some seed and tree nuts and maybe some freeze-dried fruits and veggies to top things off. But I also follow the tablespoon method, where my birds aren't getting huge amounts of food all the time, because there seems to be this myth that they'll starve if they don't have access to food 24 hours a day. Yeah, you want to
overnight. Yeah,
overnight. Yeah, or overnight. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody have anything to add?
Oh, sorry.
I was waiting for the unmuting here.
Well, I keep having to mute because my dogs are like acting like lunatics tonight.
Well, they are dachshunds. I mean, dachshunds aren't known for being calm, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to really watch how much I feed my birds, because I have a tendency to do that. I mean, it's mostly fresh food in the morning, but I'm trying to get to what you're showing here, Jordan. At least it's not like filled to the top with fresh food. Well, maybe they just need another couple tablespoons.
Well, and it's funny because when I created this this image with the tablespoons, this is on my kitchen counter. When I created this image, every time I post it, I get a ton of people who are like all guilty, going, "Oh God, I overfeed my birds." I mean, we're all trying to do better. It's fine. Like but we're trying to do better, and your birds are less likely to just pick out the things they like and leave the rest. If you're controlling the portion sizes, they're more apt to then eat more of the diversity, more of those things. So,
I just picture Lisa feeding that bottom picture, like the whole bowl of it. Whereas I'm feeding like
it comes from the whole having 3 kids, feeding is like nurturing.
Yeah.
So they need a lot of food in their bowl, but that's clearly not the case.
Yeah. So we also hear fresh food is too expensive to feed. And there are so many ways that you can do this. This blend on the left is a sprouting blend, and it's basically grains and some legumes like lentils and adzuki beans. And you can buy big bulk quantities of this and store it forever, right? You can store it literally forever and just soak and sprout this stuff on your kitchen counter. You're offering a diverse set of food in one scoop. You're just adding water and sprouting, and we'll talk about sprouting another time. But you can easily get the steps for sprouting on Google. I mean, there's tons of resources about how to safely sprout things. And then growing things, these are kale microgreens. You can buy big batches of kale seeds and sprinkle them over some soil, water them, and in a week or two, you've got microgreens. And microgreens are better, more nutritious than the whole adult kale. So you can capitalize on growing these things and not having to keep them alive for weeks to months, and still get better nutrition into your birds. So this stuff is not expensive, and you want your birds to be able to eat anything in the grocery store, right? The produce section of the grocery store. If something happens to you, it's much easier for someone to just run over to the corner grocery store and grab some produce and offer that to your birds. So, it doesn't have to be expensive. What I find expensive is processed food. That's what I find expensive.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just complain about their schedules, and they don't think that they have enough time to do this stuff, but really it doesn't take too much, too much effort or time. You could just take a sprout blend, let it soak for 8 to 12 hours, even a little more than that, overnight, and then start sprouting it the next day. So,
It's
I think
really
a big
about getting
reason is
5 minutes a day.
Yeah,
5 minutes
about-
total.
it's about getting in a routine more than anything, because I struggled with that a little bit too, with working full time and, with Rocky Mountain Parrot, and I have kids and grandkids, and it just, once I got in a routine of having the sprouts and having everything ready and just having to chop up some vegetables in the morning, it's completely easy. Now, it's not, to me, it's not any harder than adding pellets and a seed mix into a bunch of bowls.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, sprouting takes 5 minutes a day, and it only takes 2, maybe 3 days. If I use the Easy Sprouter, and that allows air to go in from the bottom and the top, and things sprout about twice as fast because of that airflow, unlike a mason jar. But you can rinse right in there. I mean, it's just so amazingly easy. And you can soak for 24 hours and sprout for 24 hours, and you're done. That's it.
Actually
nice and easy.
soaked. So I did the tops all in one, and then a mix of the China Prairie micrograin and citizen blends. I soaked them yesterday from about 10 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. They're already done now.
Yep.
So I obviously, I stopped soaking them at 5 or 6 o'clock, and then had been rinsing them last night until I went to bed, then rinsed them this morning. Came back from work, they're already done.
It's amazingly easy. There's no excuses. It's just amazingly easy, inexpensive. And you've got all these different textures and tastes and colors, which means different nutrients and different foraging opportunities. It's just a really great way to do it. And all of this is human grade food. It's not animal grade food. So,
and I think that fear of fresh food being dangerous or it spoiling contributes to this too. Let's say people work 9 to 5. They don't want to leave fresh food in the cage all day, so they just would rather leave a bowl of pellets. Well, if you're not cooking the food, it's not going to go bad. So you can leave it in there all day, and even a very, very small portion of pellets if you must, and you're covered.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're not rinsing the sprouts till you get home. I mean, you're rinsing them in the morning, you're rinsing them when you get home. So I don't know why you would figure that if they're in the bowl rather than in where they're draining, that they're going to go bad.
Yeah, we need to stop fearing food. there's tons of ways to do this, and we'll have to do an episode on sprouting or something like that, because I think that we can alleviate a lot of that fear when we just show the simple steps that we take. Another one is fruit is too high in sugar. And there are many low carb fruits like berries. Like berries are not high in sugar. They can be very beneficial. They're high in bioflavonoids, which give them their color, those pigments. And those are antioxidants. So those keep cells healthy and, keep them clean and functioning properly. But you can also buy unripe fruit. I mean, buying more unripe fruit can be beneficial as well. So one of the things is bananas. And, I hear from people all the time, like, oh, I can't give them bananas, it's too high in sugar. But if you feed green bananas, that not only has less sugar and more starch, but it also, the fiber that's in there is kind of like a prebiotic it for the gut, and it helps a healthy microbiome in the gut form. And those healthy gut bacteria are really connected to all of our body systems. All animals have a microbiome. And if your microbiome isn't diverse enough, you will have health problems. And I'm convinced that that's a lot of what we see in some of the maladies we see in our birds today. So green bananas are fantastic to offer. I often will take a chunk of green banana and I'll press it into the sprouts so that the sprouts are stuck to the banana, and then it forces the birds to eat it. It's a fun foraging thing for them. But as you can see, you know, if you let it go a little bit ripe, you get more higher antioxidant levels, and the fiber remains. So, you know, there's definitely benefits to offering some unripe fruit. Papaya, you know, buying unripe papaya at the produce market is another one. You know, and Tiffany and I just talked about this, like buying pitted fruits when they're really, really firm, you know, so they're not completely ripe. You're going to have less sugar in those than you would something that's really, really ripe.
What about if you're doing a plantain? Because I'm always confused about that, because I know when we want to eat them, we want to eat them basically when they're black, unless you're doing like a fried platanos or something. But like for the birds, how is there such thing as it's too green? Because sometimes when I see them in the grocery store, they're so green.
Yeah, I think that I think plantains you can pretty much offer at any point to a bird.
Okay.
I give them when they're green to all of my small soft bills. I just cut them lengthwise, and they eat them from the inside all the way down to the peel without any problems. I think it's along the same lines here. The higher fiber and starches. I think with us, they just taste better when they're more ripe, and then we tend to cook them to make them more digestible for us as well. So, yeah, I think it's along the same lines. Yeah, but there's so many different types of fruits to feed. You know, and I typically stay about 15% of the daily diet is some kind of fruit. But you know, berries, like you can't go wrong with berries. Anything that's strongly colored is probably going to be pretty healthy.
If you work,
sorry, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, if you work with almost nothing but lorries, then you know, you don't have to worry about sugar. So,
Yeah.
well, only processed sugars, but as far as fruits and stuff like that, no, you don't have to, you know, be afraid of them.
Well, and you know, like I said, you have to watch the vitamin C, right? So, like guava and papaya, super high in vitamin C. So I don't tend to offer a lot of guava or papaya to any of my toucans, any iron sensitive species, because that vitamin C is going to be problematic. But you're going to have less of that in more of the unripe fruits anyway.
Right.
Some of the sweeter fruits that, like apples and grapes and even sweet banana, those can be a good way to get birds that come in that have never eaten fresh food at all to at least try it. And then you can gradually get the banana so it's less ripe, or move from grapes and apples to something else, but it's a stair-step way to get them to at least try something fresh.
Yep, and keeping birds is a scientific experiment that never ends, right? So you're constantly trying to test these things that birds will try and eat. And you know, sometimes birds like overripe bananas. I know my tanagers love them. Like when they're brown, you can see the little peck marks left in the peel because they've devoured everything in there. So another myth is that birds need supplements. And I know that we've heard a lot about, you know, like vitamin supplements versus whole food supplements. And, you know, I love whole food supplements because they're getting whole food. There's one that I helped develop from China Prairie called Nourish. And it's basically a coarse powder that has like ground flaxseed and hemp hearts and chia seeds. So some of those real high omega-3 items that we want to get into their diet somehow. And I love mixing this into hand feeding formula because I think that that's a problem with all hand feeding formulas in that they lack omega-3 fatty acids, which is key to normal nervous system development. And so some people add oils like flaxseed oil, you know, things like that. And Tiffany, it was last night, I think we were talking about adding ground flaxseed and things like that to hand feeding formula so that the birds are getting some of that fiber as well, because chicks need the fiber to help build that microbiome.
But making sure you're not grinding it and then like you have to grind it as soon as you're going to use it, not grind 10 pounds of it and then store it because it'll go rancid.
Yeah, flaxseed especially, like grinding flaxseed, you need to get it into a sealed container as soon as you're done grinding it. And then I always recommend refrigerating it and using it, you know, as soon as you can.
What about chia? Can you grind chia and feed it, or is that not a good idea?
Yeah. You know, chia.
You might have said that I had to step away for a minute. You might. I think
No, I didn't say it. Not this time at least. But chia. Chia is a moisture absorber. So if you've ever had a chia pet, you know that the seeds produce this mucus that's like glue, right? It holds it to the clay pot or whatever you're putting it on. But chia sprouts are just amazingly healthy. But chia seeds are beneficial too. But I only offer them mixed with moisture-rich foods. And so I will. I'll sprinkle like chia seeds, like this stuff here, the powder, the chia seeds, the hemp hearts, the ground flax. I'll sprinkle that on their sprouts and mix it all in so that I'm layering nutrition in and they're getting that fresh each morning. But I just keep that in a sealed container in the refrigerator. So whole food supplements are definitely beneficial. And, you know, the vitamin supplements, if they're getting a pretty good diet, aren't going to be necessary.
What about calcium?
So calcium's in a lot of whole foods, you know, leafy greens and sprouts, and, you know, there's just all kinds of ways to get calcium. If your bird has a calcium deficiency because there's something going on, you know, grinding up cuttle bone is totally fine, or giving them cuttle bone. You know, I do that with my tortoises as well, that, you know, when they need it, they go for it. When they don't, they leave it. Coral calcium is really bioavailable. And I sent that to Hafet, who runs the Puerto Rican Parrot Project. And they use that as a supplement for some of their breeding birds. But that coral calcium seems to be really, really bioavailable, really absorbable calcium. That's my favorite supplement, at least when it comes to calcium.
What about eggshells? You can buy sterilized ground eggshell. Yes, no.
Yeah, I mean, if they're sterilized eggshells, you can offer those too. I just tend to, you know, for convenience, buying that coral calcium in a powdered form. It's just easier to get into the food and get into the bird. But they're going to get a lot of calcium if they're on a raw food diet. So, you know, if they're getting, you know, veggies, period, they're going to get some. And hold that thought, because that, I think this next myth, oxalates. We keep, you know, a lot of people have heard about, you know, I know Tiffany and I just talked about this too, spinach being bad. Spinach isn't bad. Spinach is probably not the best choice to feed alone. It's better to feed what's on the left, where you've got many different greens who all have varying levels of calcium versus oxalates. But Oxalates are compounds that bind to calcium in the diet and don't allow it to be absorbed by the body. But a lot of things we feed have oxalates. So there's no way to get away from oxalates completely. And they're not going to hurt your bird if you're offering a diverse diet. So that's one of those things where if you're offering a mixed set of greens, you're fine. You're totally good. But once again, the diet should never be predominantly one thing. It should, if you're diversifying the diet, you're much better off.
I like spinach.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't feed them that whole bunch of spinach at one time.
Yeah. Well, and spinach and a lot of the greens and broccoli are also high in iron, and I'll see people feeding that to lorries and lorikeets, and I'm like, don't do that. That's going to be problematic. So you need to know your species. That definitely helps. But most parrots will do pretty well on something like this. And then finally, all vets are well versed in animal nutrition. Sadly, this isn't true. This is something that's pretty frustrating for me, because I've been asked to speak at vet schools on avian nutrition specifically. And Dr. Becker, who's been an avian vet, an exotic animal vet, and a canine feline vet for a long time, is also frustrated by this because she's lived it and she sees what vet students, how little they learn about, nutrition. So veterinarians are critical to all of the animals that we keep. We need vets in our lives. We need vets being involved in the overall wellness and care of our birds. There's no question about that. Especially when it comes to medicine and surgery and treatment. Unfortunately, vet schools don't offer a lot of nutrition education, and the nutrition education that they get is pretty biased science, hosted by the commercial pet food companies. And I see this bias every time I speak to vet students. And so it can be really frustrating. But if you want to follow a vet who really understands nutrition, animal nutrition across the board, you definitely want to check out Dr. Karen Becker at that website, healthypets.mercola.net. That's her free educational platform. She and I have done some videos on avian nutrition and what we see and how we can do better. So definitely something to think about. Some of you may have vets who have gone above and beyond their training to research better nutrition and how to enrich the lives of the birds that we keep. And those vets should be praised. We really need more of that out there. So, we appreciate veterinarians for everything they do. And we definitely need more nutrition education when it comes to, vet training. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, most of you guys know that one of my little weenie dogs, Winston, has really bad and horribly undiagnosable allergies, it seems. And I was kind of nervous to actually bring up transitioning him to raw, because I kind of know that it's a very polarizing conversation with dogs, especially. With birds, not so much. You're not feeding them like raw animal protein. It's just vegetable and fruit matter. So with dogs, it's very, very polarizing.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous to even bring it up to her. And she was like amazing about it. She basically said, I'm on the fence about it. I don't feel one way or the other. I'd be interested to see how it goes. Mm-hmm. And, she wasn't going to immediately discount something as, she feels like it is an evolving area, and that the information is coming out. And I think she does acknowledge that there is a little bit of a marketing piece to it, that, these companies have held on to this, like this kibble for so long. And you know, I think it's like a lot of people beating the same dead horse. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But maybe it is broke, you know?
It is.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Dogs should be living much longer. Cats should be living much longer.
Exactly. If you think about it, these companies are pushing these brands and foods onto veterinarians. You know, they're even paying them to put it on the shelves, you know, it's almost like it's this cycle that keeps people coming back to the vet. You know, you keep putting crappy food out there. You keep putting this crap out there, the more problems you're going to have, and then they're going to come back to the vet, and it's just a cycle, in my opinion. But you know, there definitely are companies that are pushing this stuff onto vets. Look at the whole heart disease issue going on right now with dogs. You know, they're saying that grains are healthier, and that if you don't have grains in the diet, that contributes to heart disease. I forget what the actual term is, but it's a study that was done, but there's no actual solid proof that that's the case, you know. So just this stuff that pertains to dogs and cats, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, you know, with birds. There's just so much false information being given out there, and it's frustrating because, you know, people like us are trying to nip it in the bud and you kind of, you know, correct it, but who knows?
Well,
I thought it was coconut oil that was causing heart disease.
Yeah, right. I've heard that one a lot. A lot. It's so untrue. I mean, but we hear people who say that, you know, oh, my vet said to feed my bird cooked chicken and give them the bones, you know, and things like that. I don't know that a vet actually said that, or that they just want to believe that that's okay, but that's not okay. You know, feeding animal meat and bones and things like that is just not appropriate for parrots. And feeding cooked meat and bones to dogs and cats is not appropriate. They've evolved to eat raw bones, which are very pliable and flexible, and you know, different types of meats. So I always tell people, like, if you're feeding a dog or cat raw, get a commercially available frozen raw food diet. It's already balanced for you. It's all ground together. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. And I've seen nothing but positive as a result. So yes, like Tiffany said, it's very polarizing, but it's because of that biased education in veterinary schools that we really need to work hard to. I'm always thrilled when a vet school invites me to speak about bird nutrition, because at least I can bring something other than just feed a processed food and the bird will be fine, because that's just not true. It's just not true. But, well, this was a meaty talk, no pun intended. We'll do the next episode in a couple of weeks, and we'll dive into some other nutrition topics. And until then, leave some comments about what you learned and
what you want us to talk about.
Say it again.
I said, and what they want us to talk about. So I think if we're going to do another nutrition thing, maybe drop questions.
Absolutely.
Or even just subjects, you know, subjects that they think that we should cover.
Yeah.
Hot topics.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for being on tonight, and we will see everybody soon.
Bye.
Alrighty. Bye.